September. You can register on the website, which is www.nairobimarathon.com, and get your groove on. It's something that you can do with your friends, your family, your colleagues. I plan to go, and have a good time with my colleagues, and I just hopefully would love to meet you all there. Of course, come the 27th of October, that is when the Stanchart Marathon is on, literally, just in a few weeks. So just make sure you do that. And if you have any dreams, of, you want to be an athlete, you want to do, the marathon, you want to run, you want to be globally acclaimed, man, this platform will take you there, because some of the most established people we know, people we admire, have passed through that particular platform, and now they are global names. And speaking of people, we admire, or people we respect and would want to emulate, we have an inspiring young man here in studio with us, and his name is Leshan Kereto, HSC. Congratulations on that title. Is this a continuation of your name? Yeah, he is CEO of Terato Africa, right? Yes. Leshan, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you,
and the most amazing thing about Leshan is that he is an advocate for SRHR, that is sexual reproductive health and rights. And it's good to see a man in the forefront of such particular matters, especially right now, where we have a dicey aspect of, not being sure, are men in this? Are they not, are they vocal? Are they not? So it is on extremes, where we have very vocal men and then men who are also not as vocal as you would quote unquote assume them, to be. But Leshan, thank you so much for coming on the show. And our topic for today is men and advocacy, especially on the SRHR matters, sexual reproductive health and rights. So Leshan, nashukuru sana, asante kwa kufika leo.
Asante sana, nimeshukuru pia, nimefurahia.
Right, so Leshan, you're from a very strong community. You're very young. You have a lot of accolades to your name. So how did this journey begin, especially in advocacy, in SRHR matters?
Thank you. Thank you so much for that question and also having me on studio. My story started when I was very young. Growing up in my community, in the Maasai community, I studied together with my colleagues, both boys and girls. And as I grew up, I realized towards class 4, class 5, girls started dropping out of school. And we used to compete so much from nursery school and, number 1, number 2. And then suddenly they're just missing out, and not being seen in class. And then I was curious, but then I didn't take any action until when I was in Form 2 in high school, when I came together with other friends and we set up Terato Africa, which is a community-based organization in Narok, where I realized there was something we needed to do. And this meant that we wanted to revisit the social injustices that girls and women are facing, because then there's got to be something. But then as I continued to work, we generally just wanted to fight poverty. And then halfway through, I had a conversation with one young girl called Joyce, who, while we were, just telling them, can you go to school and study? Please just study. It's that easy. You don't have to make it so complicated. Then she told me, Leshan, it's not always that simple. Every time a girl undergoes FGM, life changes. They become a woman, they become a mother, and they just want to behave like a woman. And so sitting down in a class, being taught by a teacher who probably has not undergone FGM, sounds like it's a child teaching you while you're a woman. And so what they do is they start interacting with men, especially Morans, and the next thing they want is to get married. So there's a pressure from the girl, but there is also pressure from the community, because then FGM is a prerequisite for child marriage. So after that, at around 13 years of age, at around 13 years to 14 years, they are married off, and so they have to get started with families without any education and without any skill. And I realized that is where poverty started. And so I realized, while I am a man and I'm having the opportunity to go to school and to, get a good career and live my life, I realized on the other side, my younger sisters and my cousins and my classmates were undergoing a lot of social injustices. These were things they didn't choose. Of course, under 18 years of age, you barely know what FGM is or child marriage, but you're expected to, immediately get married and give birth to a lot of children, because children are a blessing in my community. Then I realized it's time to create awareness. I wasn't so knowledgeable at that time, but I created an organization and brought young people together, and we started helping girls by creating awareness on FGM and child marriage, and also we started donating sanitary pads. And during COVID, that is when our work rose, and we saw more men coming into the conversation, more organization rose, just because of our engagement into the conversation.
I see. Wow. You said something quite important, that when you're in school, you're very competitive, you know, with the girls, and it was just a natural thing. You know, you're all young with dreams and ambitions, and as you continue growing, girls are dropping out of school, and you start wondering, you know, why. You know, the funny thing is, not most young guys will ask, you know, or rather are brought up to care as to why these girls are coming out. So where is your connection exactly? Is it something that you were taught, you know, to be more, let me say, in touch with what's happening around, that girls need an education just as much as boys? Like I said, I was talking to you earlier, and I said you come from a very strong community where men, you know, value certain aspects in a very strong way as compared to others. You know, so where's your point?
I think with me, I think that I have an innate ability to think I can change things. That's one thing I struggle with, and while I have struggled to probably say no to many things, but then this was one of those instances that, you know, changed the trajectory of my life, because ever since I was in nursery school, I always felt like I can change things, and I had that responsibility of trying to take action, and running in my mind are a lot of ideas of how to do things, and I realized that I couldn't live knowing and having the guilt that I could do something and I didn't do it. And so my connection is the fact that I'm a responsible person. I've been a leader since I was young, and I realized that there was something I needed to do. And I also saw it was not only affecting other people, it was affecting my own family. And it meant that the people I loved the most were at risk of going through that. And also the children that are going to come up were also at the risk. So I realized it was going to start with me, or then I'm just going to live a normal life like everyone else. But at the same time, whatever career I'm going to take, let's say I'm going to be a doctor, for example, I'm going to find these cases as fistula or maternal maternal issues, or, you know, maternal difficulties, or, you know, if I'm not going to face that, I'm going to see that as poverty, as you know, as street families, you know, due to poverty that has, you know, made women to leave. I'm going to see it in the hospital as gender-based violence, because then these girls who are married into these families, they are married to probably someone who didn't love them, someone they didn't choose, and they do not have any education. So you find that a woman is beaten up, they can't even go home because they can't even afford fare to go home. They can't even afford their own sanitary pads. So that was a way we were raising gender-based violence to go higher, just because of that practice of female genital mutilation. And I realized there was something I could do. I could create awareness, and I brought my colleagues together. We were contributing about 200 shillings only, and, you know, buying sanitary pads and going to visit those families. And I realized that from there was action that was coming up. While nobody listened at the beginning, because it didn't make any sense for a man to advocate for women, because, I mean, you have a career to live and nobody is really having any problem with you. But then the in-depth and innate feeling of responsibility carried me on and allowed me to take responsibility, not because I was being paid, but also because I was passionate about changing the community. And I believe that is what we are all called upon to do. And so I took that responsibility, and here we are now, having achieved so much and having impacted so many lives.
I see. Now, you have the men in the community. You mentioned these young girls will go get married to the Morans. Yep. And they may wonder, why are you even doing this? You know, you already answered that, but my point is to them. Do they see you as someone who is not as strong? Someone who is not as, you know, you don't understand what a man is supposed to be and act like because you care. What do you mean love? You know, they're supposed to be, you know, baby making machines, as some, you know, men would put it. So how do you relate with other men who are in-depthly in tradition?
Yeah, I must say that at the beginning it was very difficult to talk about these issues, because then I was branded names, like I was called Mr. FGM, for example, among my own colleagues, and a women's guy and a man who loves women. And I was in Juba last year, and I was named Garang because there's a lot of women, because you love supporting women. And so all those names meant that there was something I was doing. I took it as a motivation. While men did not see the impact of what I was doing at that time, but then, you know, everyone is okay if these practices go on unless it touches on their sister or their daughter. So once in a while you'll hear these cases and people can, you know, get to feel like, hey, I think you have a point. There's something you're advocating against. And so as we created awareness, we started reaching out to religious leaders, elders, and we'll have discussions with them, and I will tell them that I'm so and so from this clan, I'm a Maasai, and I'm also studying, I'm pursuing my career, and I come from a stable family. But then still this issue is a priority to me. And so the fact that I am trying to take care of my own people means that you should take care of your own people. And the Maasai, talk about a man being an end to poverty in a family. But then we are still seeing poverty, which meant there is still a reason. But then we realized that as we continue having those discussions, and at some point during COVID, President Uhuru Kenyatta awarded me for my outstanding efforts to end FGM. And I think to me that was a game changer, because if the president saw that this young man from Narok is doing something, it meant that other men would respect me as well. And from there, many men started to come and listen, at least just to see what exactly this guy is talking about. And we spoke on radio, we spoke on TV, we spoke on meetings. We'll get into arguments and we'll talk about this issue. We'll talk about the myths and misconceptions. For example, there's so many myths around FGM. Like, for example, they say that if the clitoris is not cut, it grows to become your third leg. Or if you do not undergo FGM, you might risk, if you cook for many people, they might end up dying out of poisoning. Yeah. And we will sit down and talk about this issue. And we will say, look at Luo women, for example. We have never heard of all Luo women dying just because they don't undergo FGM, or other communities like the Pokot or the Turkana who don't practice FGM. Then we come down, after a long argument, we realize that these are actually our own myths and misconceptions that are not adding up. So standing up, being successful on my own career, and actually living and being persistent and having the passion to take it on has made men listen. And so many men, I can assure you, have come out to even set up their own community-based organizations and coming in to even speak on our own platforms. And at least men confirming that they're going to take care of their own sisters. That's all we wanted, because our work is not only to work, but it's also inspiring men. And I must say that we've seen results, and we've seen young men come up. We've seen even the governors recognizing our work and also declaring that they're going to end FGM, and members of parliament. We've also seen, women stand out to be strong in our communities, and they have proven that they can achieve so many goals. Like, for example, the cabinet secretary, Soipan Toya, my area MP, who is Agnes Pareyo, who for the first time became the first member of parliament in Narok County, which has never been heard of, while advocating against FGM. So we realized that it was possible for us to take out these practices, harmful practices like child marriage and FGM, and actually remain with the good cultural practices and still remain to be men and still remain to be successful in our careers. I
see. Yep. Now, how do the statistics look like? Because what we're seeing here is men are growing more aware, but they have always been aware. For some of them, it's been a shove. Some of them is to, have more confidence in supporting, aspects like, women being educated, being empowered and the like. So it doesn't seem to be a very clear line. So we assume, or we know it to be less, if we don't have the numbers, right? So in your experience, how does it look like in the country, especially from your community? Do we have more men in advocacy? And when you look at other African countries, like let's say the one you visited, Juba, do we also have that in that area? And what do the numbers look like?
Oh yes, so in terms of the numbers, I think grossly there has been a rise in the number of men coming out to speak about FGM and child marriage, many of whom personally have been able to mentor. Others have been able to come up through other platforms. And I must say, what we've seen since 2014 and 2022, we've seen a decrease in FGM from 21% prevalence to 15% prevalence. We've also seen child marriage also decrease by a great percentage. We've also seen that as we continue to take girls to school, we've realized that FGM happens more on girls who do not have any education. 53% of the girls who've undergone FGM have no education, but only 5.3% have undergone FGM while having been able to get education up to secondary level. So you see that there is a role that education is bringing towards ending FGM. And we've realized that also parents who have been educated are less likely to have their girls undergo FGM. So those are some of the things we've seen, and we've also seen that child marriage has reduced, which is a prerequisite of FGM. You know, FGM is a prerequisite of child marriage. And so while I've been able to work in 16 countries around the world right now in terms of my advocacy, Juba does not practice female genital mutilation, but they have other forms of gender-based violence, like beating up a wife, you know, just before marriage. There's just that norm of beating up women, which is very normal.
A rite of passage.
Yes, it's a rite of passage. But then, having worked in West Africa, which is there are a lot of Muslims there, and there are also very stronger cultures there. We've seen more men starting to talk about it. I was privileged in 2021, courtesy of UNFPA, to help set up the Global Youth Consortium against FGM. And for the first time, I saw so many young men who are fighting FGM. And that global forum gave me the opportunity to feel like I was part of a global family of men who are actually engaging. We've seen organizations like Men Engage Alliance unite so many young people across the globe and talk about, you know, ending female genital mutilation. And here in Kenya, I'm glad to have recruited so many university students who are men who are coming to speak about it. And while they are aware of FGM, many people just know FGM as female genital mutilation or cutting women. Many of them do not know the types and the impact that it has. And we've realized that while we've been able to share and talk to them about what exactly FGM is and what are the repercussions that come with it and what are the types, and the fact that it can actually cause maternal deaths, it causes fistula, it causes overbleeding, it has psychosocial effects. Many young men have come out to talk about, you know, I think this is something that we can help stop, because then many of our organizations are going to communities, but we are forgetting university students who are actually role models for those young girls, and when they come back, they just say, let the practice go. So we decided to target them, and many young men have started to be part of the conversation. And the goal of this was trying to create a new professional generation that says no to FGM. So Remmy sitting here at K24 can say no to FGM, and the receptionist can say no to FGM, and teachers in classes, and people working in government, working in the communities, in national parks. We just want to create that generation of people who are knowledgeable about it. So even as you practice it, you know the dangers that come with it. And this is being led by men. And I'm glad that so many men are at least not becoming the resistance you're facing. At least, even if you do not come out like me to talk about it, at least create awareness and stand against it. You can call a toll-free lines like the 1195 and report a girl that is in risk. And also, we're not only talking about FGM to men. We are talking about their own issues. You know, men have their own needs when it comes to sexual and reproductive health. We've spoken to them about prostate cancer. We've spoken to them about family planning, the need for gender equality. They need to also see that bringing equality is not competing with a man. We're just talking to them about, look at all these social injustices that my classmates, for example, faced. While I had a smooth time growing up, they had to figure out child marriage, FGM, teenage pregnancy. They had to figure out, intimate partner violence. They had to figure out their own bodies, understanding their own bodies. And we cannot say that's a just world. We cannot say that's gender equality. And we are talking to them about beyond FGM. You at the end of the day want to see your daughter grow in a platform that allows her to live up to her full potential. Why not give other people an opportunity as well? And many young men have come out to be champions of gender equality, and I'm so glad and proud of many of them who are coming out to speak about it, because then I think alone I cannot create a community that is just, but with other young men there's an opportunity to live up to our full potential, and also helping other girls to live up to their full potential.
Okay. Yep. You said something very vital about men understanding their own bodies.
Yep.
And I would beg to ask about how traditionally a man is, gotten into the space where he is prepared to be a man. Most of the time in most cultures, like you rightfully mentioned, women are prepared. In the coastal culture, in other different cultures, women are taught, how to be a wife, how to be a woman, and factors that come along with it. But we don't highlight a lot of how a man is prepared to live in this particular world as a husband, or just generally a man, to understand himself. It's mostly, after circumcision, you're a man, go out into the world, conquer, like the assumption that most generally the public would make.
Yeah.
Right? So when you sit with this man, especially from your community, and you're empowering them or encouraging them or demystifying, dispelling certain myths of tradition, what issues come up and what do you feel is lacking that tradition has set in course for so many years that a lot is lost in translation and we don't seem to understand who this individual is as a man?
Oh yes, I think for men growing up, while we tend not to speak about it, I think it's a challenge as well. Growing up from a community, you are automatically assumed taking care of cattle. You start with the smaller ones, and then all the ways you get circumcised, you get to assume other roles. But then what we've seen, going and growing up is you see that boys, are have to undergo circumcision for them to become a man, which circumcision has shown to have some health benefits. And so what we've seen is at that time they have an opportunity to be taught a lot about being a man and taking care of the families, taking care of themselves. But then what we've seen is there is that sudden change from being a boy to a man, and you're suddenly expected to figure everything out, which is not necessarily automatic. While in the past it might have been fine, just because maybe you don't have so much education to do or so much money to raise. But then we've seen economic times change. We've seen families grow in a lot of economic struggle. So what we've seen is technology is rising, and so a young boy being expected to be a man at the age of 14 and figuring it out and having to marry at that tender age, we've seen, and I can say many of my friends have stagnated at that time, because then you realize you have to provide for a family just because you're
at 14 and 15.
Yes, you drop out of school and you have to provide for a family, and while you probably had one source of income, you realize that everything is being pumped back to the family. So you getting that opportunity to actually grow and and advance your own life becomes difficult, because then you can no longer really grow. And then there's no family planning in some of our traditional families, and so there's not that opportunity to speak about let's have one kid, and then in 2 years or 3 years you can have another one. And so we're just having so many kids being raised in a small family, and in a family of young men like me, you have someone has 4 or 5 kids and they're still having more children. So what we're talking to men about is there are options for family planning. You can, together with your spouse, discuss and go to the hospital and get advised on what family planning methods work for you. But then those are some of the things that we've seen happening. But then the other things, and I think what is common across the country.
No, Leshan, just hold on to that thought.
Yep.
And then when we come back from the break, of course, you'll elaborate more on this particular aspects. We're taking a short break. We'll be back with more of this conversation. Do stay with us.
We interrupt this program to bring you some breaking news.
Meet the team of undercover teenage spies working for a fictional version of the secret intelligence agency known as the MI9.
This keeps happening!
They had to strike a balance between school life and their job as secret agents.
First day back at school and we're gonna be late. Shh.
MI High. Every Saturday from 10 a.m.